Want to feel old? The Emperor's New Groove came out on December 15th of the year 2000, which means that it's officially 21 years old now. Sorry, I'm just having an existential crisis. But since it's 21 years old now, that means we can drink with it now. Am I right, ladies? That was not as much as I thought it was going to be, but okay. This movie is literally old enough to be our drinking buddies now, so cheers. The Emperor's New Groove is my favorite movie of all time. I've seen it so many times throughout my life that I can quote it at least 80% of the movie from memory, and so I'm really annoying to watch this movie with.
Oh, I know. I'll turn him into a flea. A harmless little flea. And then I'll put that flea in a box. And then I'll put that box inside of another box. And then I'll nail that box to myself. And when it arrives, I'll smash it with a hammer. It's brilliant, I say. Genius, I say.
My fiance cannot stand to watch this movie with me because I quote pretty much every line of this movie. This movie is tied into our proposal. We went to a movie theater and I was under the impression that we were going to see the new Godzilla vs. King Kong movie, and it was like a private screening with all of our friends. And suddenly there was a video of my man on the screen and I said, "What's going on?" And then he proposed to me, and then afterwards he was like, "So we're actually not here to watch Godzilla vs. King Kong." And I was like, we're not? What are we doing then? And he was like, "We're watching The Emperor's New Groove." And I said, "Really?" And that's when I started sobbing. So this movie has a really nice memory associated with it now, but it was also a huge part of my childhood as well. My favorite thing about this movie is the fact that it's so different from other traditional Disney movies from around its time, which really appealed to me as a youth, because I wasn't super interested in a lot of the princess movies, and my parents didn't really like some of the classic older Disney films. So there were some things that I never really watched as a kid just because they were either really sad and dark, or they were cheesy musicals, which my parents did not like. And I think that's probably my fault because when I was like 5 years old, I watched Wizard of Oz on repeat multiple times a day. So I was probably responsible for the reason why they don't like musical movies. So, that kind of backfired a little bit. My exposure to Disney was mainly through Disney Pixar movies, because that's just the movies that my mom especially loved to watch. They didn't have any cheesy musical numbers. Most of them weren't as dark and depressing. This was before Toy Story 3 though, which absolutely destroyed me as like a teenager, so but that's besides the point. And also, the stories of Pixar films were a bit different and creative. Like Toy Story, what if toys were actually alive? Monsters Inc., what if monsters were real and they had their own little civilization? Finding Nemo, what if fish could talk? You know, super deep intellectual creative concepts. However, there was something special about The Emperor's New Groove that my mom seemed to like, I guess, which meant that I was allowed to watch it. Don't judge me, I was a very sheltered child, leave me alone. It stands out from a lot of the other Disney films because it's a comedy instead of a musical. The Emperor's New Groove is filled with so much nonsense humor, but at the same time, it's still really wholesome and fun to watch. And that's the kind of humor I loved as a kid, and honestly, that's exactly my sense of humor now. When I was watching this movie in preparation for this video, I was like, wow, this is my sense of humor. This makes a lot of sense. This explains why I am the way I am. But obviously, I'm not the only one who loves this movie, because there are so many people my age that also grew up with this movie that love it just as much as I do. I haven't met a single person that either, one, has not seen Emperor's New Groove at all, or two, doesn't like it. It's definitely become a cult classic amongst us millennials. But enough about me. Let's talk about why The Emperor's New Groove is so amazing and why it's a cinematic masterpiece.
Gods! Take him away!
So we mentioned the humor, and that's a huge part of it, but I think another reason why this movie is so amazing is because of the voice actors and the casting. There could not have been more perfect casting for these characters. The way these actors deliver the lines is so funny, And also, I've always noticed with this movie in particular, there's just a rhythm to this film that really is complemented by the animation and the music and everything with the way the characters talk. But anyways, yes. So the casting is literally perfect. We got David Spade as Kuzco, who just brings so much wit and sass and sarcasm to Kuzco, and he fits the, like, you know, self-obsessed emperor prince so well. And his narration and the fourth wall breaks that Kuzco does just make this film so meta and unique and special. And you can't help but love Kuzco even when he's being a self-centered ass and he's just chucking old men out of windows. But through his bromance with Pacha, Kuzco becomes a much more compassionate person and a better leader. We love to see good character development, and I'd argue that this is the best, like, character development in a Disney film. But speaking of Pacha, John Goodman as Pacha is also so perfect. I can't imagine literally anybody else voicing Pacha. Pacha is the embodiment of a family man, and he has such a good heart that he's not willing to let Kuzco go out into the scary jungle by himself to try to find his ways back to the palace. And we all know that Kuzco wouldn't have made it through the entire movie without Pacha anyway, so I love Pacha's family so much too. I think they're great. They're a lot of fun. His wife, Chicha, so great. She's so sassy as well. And fun fact, she's also the first pregnant Disney character. Talk about representation. And even Pacha's kids are great characters. Like, one of the best scenes of the movie is when Yzma and Kronk go to visit Pacha's house, and Chicha and the kids are like stalling them a little bit, and then they have this crazy way to get them out of the house. I love it. It's so awesome. But now we're moving on to the antagonist, the villain, the queen of the whole film, Yzma. Oh my god, I love Yzma so much. She has always been, like, my favorite character of this movie, and I dare say that she's my favorite Disney villain of all time. Eartha Kitt absolutely crushes it as Yzma. I love her voice in general, and she just brings a lot of energy to the character. And the fact that they paired her up with Kronk, who is basically a personified version of a golden retriever, is hilarious. Their dynamic is so fun to watch because they're just such different people. I love how wholesome and lovable Kronk is, because the whole movie, all he really cares about is cooking and bird watching and talking to squirrels. And of course, his shoulder angels, they're like one of the best parts of the film. They feel random and they don't feel like they contribute much to, like, the actual plot, but at the same time they kind of do, because they help Kronk make a difficult decision, and they're basically the comedic relief whenever Kronk is put in a really tense and stressful situation and he doesn't know what to do. So it kind of like lightens the mood a little bit, and it kind of reminds you, like, hey, this movie's a comedy. It's fine. Laugh a little bit. But as perfect as I think this movie is, it didn't do that great, like, box office performance-wise. Prepare yourself, we're about to crunch some numbers. Where are my math people at? Here we go. The Emperor's New Groove had an estimated budget of $100 million, but it only made $10 million its opening weekend. Over time, it ended up making $89 million in the States and $80 million worldwide, for a grand total of $169 million. And you might be thinking to yourself, Hannah, that's great. $169 million? That doesn't sound like a failure to me, but that is the lowest box office earnings for an animated Disney film since the 80s. Gotta bring this wine back out, that's really sad. But there are several reasons why it didn't do well at the box office. Number one, marketing. So on Thanksgiving weekend of the year 2000, just 3 weeks before The Emperor's New Groove was supposed to come to theaters, Disney released 102 Dalmatians. And of course, Disney poured a lot of money into marketing that over this new little buddy comedy about a llama set in South America. Like, when you compare that to cute little Dalmatian puppies, Emperor's New Groove didn't really stand a chance. Reason number two, look what I can do. I'm just kidding. Timing. The fact that it came out in the middle of December just doesn't really seem like the smartest move that Disney could have done for this film in particular. In December, people are wanting to go see Christmas movies. winter-themed movies. So when you have 102 Dalmatians, and you also have Jim Carrey's How a Grinch Stole Christmas that had just came out like a month prior, people are gonna want to see those movies over The Emperor's New Groove. But Disney had to keep the same release date in December because of a deal that they had with McDonald's and the Happy Meal toys. And if they didn't make that deadline, Ronald was gonna come after Disney with a ton of fines. I think if they could have waited an extra 6 months and released this in the summer of 2001, it would have done so much better. Number one, because it just feels so much more like a summery movie anyway, just because it's set in South America where the climate's warmer. Or they just could have released it at a time when Disney didn't have any other movies coming out, and they could have had a lot more time and more money to pour into the marketing, so it could have performed better box office wise. Also, they could have had more time to work on it since it got rushed because they had to completely change the story. Emperor's New Groove started off as a completely different movie under a completely different name all the way back in 1994. So yes, that does mean that this movie took 6 years to come out. Its original title was supposed to be Kingdom of the Sun, and it was supposed to be an Inca version of Mark Twain's The Prince and the Pauper. And, get this, it was supposed to be a musical because the director, Roger Allers, had just directed The Lion King in 1994. So Disney was like, oh, let's just do another one. That seems to be doing really well for us. And since Elton John did so good with The Lion King, they wanted to recruit another like big name songwriter for Kingdom of the Sun, so they got Sting to write the songs. And if you can find some of the songs online, they're pretty good, especially Yzma's song. It's called Snuff Out the Light. It's so good. Even though Sting did a great job with the music, it wasn't enough to save the movie, and the whole thing ended up getting totally scrapped. Here's a short summary of what the plot was supposed to be. So the protagonist was actually supposed to be Pacha, who was a young llama herder instead of like a middle-aged man, and he was supposed to be voiced by not John Goodman, but Owen Wilson?
Yeah, weird.
So Pacha meets Emperor Manco, who is Cusco's character, and he's still played by David Spade.
Yeah, why did they change Manco?
It means bad movie in Turkish, and they didn't want that.
And super conveniently, Pacha and Manco look and sound exactly the same. And it is funny because, like, when you hear David Spade and Owen Wilson's voices together, they do sound similar.
Only one of royal descent bears the mark of his son.
Oh wow, is that like a tattoo?
Hey, don't touch.
So, with this concept, I think Owen Wilson would have been a good Pacha, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad it didn't work out with this story. And Yzma, who is still voiced by Eartha Kitt, is actually a sorceress in this version. Her motive wasn't to rule the empire, but to summon the god of death to destroy the sun, to restore her youth and her beauty, because she believes that the sun caused her wrinkles. Sunscreen, girl. Sunscreen. So Yzma finds out about Manco and Pacha switching places, so she turns Manco into a llama so she can tell the two apart. So at least they kept the llama transformation part in The Emperor's New Groove. While Pacha and Manco have traded places, Pacha ends up falling in love with Manco's fiance Nina, and Manco ends up meeting a female llama herder who helps him find his way back home. Pacha and Manco set out to stop Yzma, but Yzma kills Manco and the whole kingdom is engulfed in darkness. Pacha and the rest of the city somehow lasso down the sun god, who destroys the god of death, and Yzma turns to dust. Manco comes back to life, is turned back into a human, and he tries to give Pacha his crown. Pacha declines his offer to go back to his llama herder life with his new woman, Manco's fiance Nina. Nina and Pacha end up getting married and living happily ever after. So yeah, it sounds like a classic Disney film, right? You got your grand adventure, you got your romance, you got magic, you got some mythology in there. It's got a little bit of everything. But that was kind of the problem with it. There was way too much going on. There were too many characters, but also the story is just very cliche and predictable, and we've seen it from Disney a million times before. So after 2 years of meetings and failed screenings and arguments, they brought in Mark Dindal to co-direct with Roger Allers. However, the two seemed to be taking the film in two different directions. So Roger Allers was trying to rework the original idea, while Mark Dindal was kind of coming up with a completely new story. It just became kind of obvious that Mark Dindal's story was coming together a bit easier for the whole production team, so Roger Allers, realizing that his original idea just wasn't gonna work out, he ended up backing out of the film, and Mark Dindal became the solo director. There was even a documentary called The Sweatbox that was made by Sting's wife, Trudy Styler, and originally it was supposed to document Sting's experience of writing songs for a Disney movie, but then it ended up following the complete transition of Kingdom of the Sun into The Emperor's New Groove. But unfortunately, because Disney is so secretive and they don't want anybody to know the behind-the-scenes process of how any of the films are made, apparently, this documentary never really got released to the public. It was shown in like a couple film festivals in like 2002, but that's it. I was able to watch it on YouTube. I watched some really crappy low-res bootlegged version of it on YouTube, so I'll link that down below if you want to watch it. Not a very fun viewing experience, but it was a really cool documentary to watch, and it was really interesting to see and to just learn more about my favorite movie. I had no idea that The Emperor's New Groove went through all of this crap for 6 years. So it was kind of cool to see the behind the scenes part of it. But I do feel like this documentary just barely scratched the surface, because it ended and I was like, oh, that was it. But it was still good, and I really recommend watching it, even if you have to watch it illegally. But at this point, Disney just needs to put it on Disney Plus already. Okay, so you know, at the end of the film, when Kuzco and Pacha have their own little pool houses and then they slide into a little lake or river or whatever body of water that is, and they have a little pool party with their cute little pool houses with Pacha's family and their little village friends, and it's just a really happy ending. Apparently, it wasn't originally supposed to end like that. And the only reason why we have the ending that we have now is because of Sting, actually. And I learned this from the documentary. The original ending was supposed to be that Kuzco had made Kuzcotopia, just not on Pacha's Hill anymore. But Sting actually had a big problem with that, and he wrote the filmmakers a letter just being like, hey, I don't agree that Kuzco ended up making his obnoxious Kuzco-themed theme park about himself still. And I agree. I think he's right. Because if he ended up making Kuzcotopia, it's like, what was the point of all of this character development that he just had? So in Sting's letter, he was like, yo, if you don't change the ending, like, I kind of don't want to be associated with the film anymore. I forgot to mention, he ended up still writing songs for the movie. He had Kuzco's theme song at the beginning, and then the end credit song. But anyway, so the filmmakers were actually super cool, and they respected Sting's suggestion, and they listened to it, and they were like, you know what, you're absolutely right. That makes a lot of sense. So they changed the ending to Kuzco building the little pool houses for him and Pacha. So thank you, Sting, for looking out for the film like that. It was very cool of you. Much respect to Sting.
Pull the lever, Kronk.
The fact that The Emperor's New Groove started off as a completely different movie and went through 6 years of production hell to get to where it ended up honestly makes me love the film even more. I do feel really bad for the filmmakers, especially Roger Allers, because Kingdom of the Sun was like his baby. As a fellow filmmaker, I completely understand that, and it's really hard to let an idea of yours to just let it go and to just drop it and just be like, oh, this isn't gonna work. It's really depressing. Mark Dindal had to come in and just chuck it out the window, but I am grateful for everything that this film had to go through to turn it into the movie that we know and love. The Emperor's New Groove still holds up today, not only because of its sense of humor, the incredible voice casting, its passionate fan base, and the fact that it's not like other Disney films. It's not like the other girls. But it's a classic because of its message. We see a selfish and obnoxious and annoying, self-centered prince who only cares about himself learn how to be a more compassionate human being and a better leader through his friendship with a peasant. It's a Disney film about bromance and people turning into animals. Like, it doesn't get any better than that.
Hey, I've been turned into a cow. Can I go home?
You're excused.
Thank you for watching my first ever video essay. I had a really fun time doing this. Hope you really enjoyed it as much as I do. Give it a like if you want more video essays from me. And also don't forget to subscribe to see what other video essays I might make in the future. Who knows? Once again, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. And don't let anyone throw off your groove. Bye!
And the day has made his journey.
But there are several reasons? Several reasons why this happened. The original ending was supposed to be that Kuko? Oh my god, I'm tired. I can't do this. Oh my god. Give me a second.